Hi, and welcome to The Pathway. This is a podcast brought to you by Pure Psychiatry of Michigan. My name is Taylor Henrik. This is my colleague, Sarang Patel.
Hi, guys.
Today, we're going to be talking about family support, the role that it plays in the individual's mental health, and how we can all be a good support for others who might be struggling with their own mental health issues.
Let's get it. So, family support. Obviously, we know it's good to have family support, but not everyone has it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do, or what's your opinion, I should say, on what do you do if you don't have a good family support?
Ooh, well, the way that I look at it is support doesn't always need to be familial, right? Family support makes a monumental difference. It's nice to have backing. It's good to know that we always talk about social support, it's a safe home life, people being in your corner, being able to support you during your mental health journey, right? We know that these are sometimes long pathways, sometimes short journeys, and each person's struggle or battle with their own mental health is going to require more effort than just what that person's able to give. So if they don't have family support, I always recommend that individuals find other forms of support, right? There's community groups, there's online forums, there's people that are out there that are going through similar struggles. So I feel that even if the family support may not be there or the understanding of what you're going through with your mental health battle, maybe someone else can empathize with you or understand what you might be facing. How do you engage your clients or help them through whether they may or may not have family support in their mental health struggles?
Well, I think the first thing is, like you said, right? If you have nuclear family support, parents or siblings in a nuclear family, that can be really helpful. Sometimes there's two levels to that, right? It's that they're supportive physically, but they may not understand mental health or maybe dealing with it. So you can actually be kind of hindered sometimes by that, right? When your parents don't actually maybe understand mental health or think it's a real thing, for instance, right? Then you don't have that nuclear family support. So if you don't have that nuclear family support and your siblings as well, then you need to look for an external source, I would say. And I think most people should always have an external source too. Like you said, community forums, whatever it may be that is helpful, great. But at that point, it leads me to therapy. I always tell people, everyone needs a therapist. Even if your parents are supportive, a therapist doesn't hurt. Whether you see them once a month, once every 3 months, once every 6 months, whether you see them just to vent, it doesn't necessarily matter. Because it's good to have an independent source, someone who's skilled, someone who's trained to do it, to be helpful there, right? Versus it being a family member or even a friend or a best friend that you vent to or a neighbor that you vent to. This is someone completely independent that you can obviously bounce ideas off of. Even if it's business growth ideas or whatever it is, that's not necessarily depression or anxiety, it doesn't hurt to have that. So I'm not pushing everyone to say that you have to have a therapist now, but the idea is that it doesn't hinder you.
Well, those individuals are professionally trained.
Right.
So the idea is if you're coming to that individual as a unbiased member in your life or an objective member who's able to comment on what you might be going through, it's nice that they can provide you feedback that's going to be unbiased. They may not have known you since you were a child. Or have any vested interest in your personal pursuits. But they're able to say, hey, here's what I'm hearing and here's how I might be able to help. Or here's what I believe you should do moving forward. So reaching out and finding support with a professional can make a big difference.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said about family, the nuclear family. Do you think that there are generational views on mental health? Speaking about our age and where we're at.
I would say for sure. I would say, we're in our 30s, right? I would say that if anything is good, I guess you could say, right, about what's happened over the last 5 years worldwide, you could say there's been more an emphasis on mental health, more of obviously acknowledgement about mental health being a real thing globally, right? But we know that there's cultural changes in that, right? So brown people, for instance, right, like myself, in our community, sometimes we don't really talk about mental health. Something tragic can happen. There can be an unfortunate suicide. There can be known depression, known anxiety, known behaviors, whatever it may be. No one really talks about it. Maybe you have a couple days and it's swept underneath the rug, or no one really mentions it, right? But realistically, like we always talk about this, right? As friends when we hang out and talk, like mental health does not discriminate on anything. Race, color, age, demographics, where you live, whatever it is, right? Finances, it doesn't matter. It's always there. So I think that a little bit, I went off topic from your question actually, but is that culturally there's a big shift in hopefully putting the emphasis on mental health, right, and where it's at, but it's still not where it needs to be.
I appreciate you bringing that up. Do you think growing up in a brown home and, raising your own kids, do you think that shift is occurring? Do you think it's going to be our generation that's going to be the catalyst? Or what do you see in terms of how that might change for individuals of color?
I mean, I think our generation has done a good job in trying to make it more well-known, right? But obviously our parents' generation is still there as well. There's still a perception that you have to change, right? I don't think that we're fully even close to being there in brown culture, you could say, right? Not even close to where it should be at, right? I hope that the next generation actually does better with it. But what's crazy is that it shouldn't take generations to make this needle move, right? Certain shifts, I understand. They take time. They take many years to kind of fix, you could say, or kind of work on. But when you're talking about just making mental health aware or being aware of it, it shouldn't take a major move. It shouldn't take you one generation to say, hey, we all need to eat healthier and the food that we eat is not healthy, we should fix it. But we're going to wait for the next generation, right? That just sounds kind of like absurd. So how is it okay to say, well, our generation's did a good job, we've done a little bit better, but we hope the next one does better for mental health? It shouldn't take that.
No, I agree. And a paradigm shift, like a whole view change on mental health, is going to take time. We know that. Right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's a big ad campaign, mental health is health. And maybe I'm incorrect in that quote, but I think that's something that I've seen. Creating this idea, not even creating, just recognizing mental health as being a part of the physical health, right? There is no separation between your physical health and your mental health. Mental health is on the review of systems. When you talk about your psychiatric review of systems, it's one of the systems. And we review it that way, just like your skin, just like your cardiovascular system, et cetera. You can go on and on. So I think that the level of recognition, and we always talk about if there was a silver lining to the pandemic, it's accelerated the idea that mental health is something we need to treat, and we need to treat urgently. There is no time to waste. If you're struggling with a mental health issue, the time is now to seek care. And whether your family may understand that, whether you're an individual of color or whether you're not an individual of color, if your family supports you or not, it's always the right time to reach out for help. I always want to drill that home.
Right.
Don't delay getting the care that you think you might need based on the views or conception of somebody else, or a misconception of what mental health is. So I like the idea that, call it our parents' generation, whether it's a baby boomer or not, call our generation whatever we might be, whether it's millennial or any other gen that's out there. But the shift that is occurring and this understanding / recognition / self-awareness in mental health is moving in the right direction. Can we say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know me, I like to go fast.
You like to
go fast. I talk fast. Someone this needle needs to move a lot faster here, right? It's taking too long.
Okay.
But you're right. It is improving over generations, although at a slower pace than I'd like it to be. It is moving, and it shouldn't take pandemics to make the needle move farther and faster, right? I always look at it in this mindset, right? When I tell patients is that, oh, you were seeing a therapist before, let's say, or you were not, right? And things are going well. And my dad always says this, right? Everyone rides this high wave when life is going really well. It just takes something really small to take you off that wave. And the way life works is you're always going to get a curveball. That wave is always going to come down. You could be making millions and millions and millions, or making a lot of money, or whatever is going really well. Health is going really great, and something always happens. Just the way life works, it brings you down. So what I'm trying to get at is I always tell patients, hey, while things are good, that's great. But you should still have someone in your pocket, a therapist, a prescriber. It doesn't mean to be on meds. You don't have to be on medications. A friend, a family, community, someone to lean support on. So not always worried about when things are going to be bad. Don't be overly paranoid about it, but understand that it's easier to use a support when you've already have it established versus waiting for something bad to happen, spiraling down, and now trying to catch yourself. Right? Be proactive, not reactive for mental health, right? And that includes like anything basic from sleep. Like, be proactive about it. Just be cognizant of what things you're doing that could make your sleep better, physical health-wise, right? What things you could do better exercise-wise. All these aspects, if you can be proactive about it, then it's much better. But the same thing goes with mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good point to make, is that we reach out for our supports, just to bring it back to family support. We reach out for them when we need help.
Right.
But do we recognize our familial or other supports when things are going well? No.
We never do.
We tend to not. We don't look inward and think, man, I'm so supported by my spouse. I'm so supported by my cousin who calls. I'm so supported by my kid who checks on me.
Right.
We don't really think like that when things are going well. So for you to bring up the idea that, hey, like keep those supports close, make sure that you always recognize and appreciate who's there for you and who's going to bat for you when things are good, because who's the first person you're going to call when something's not going well?
Yeah.
Right? I lean on you for support. I call you because you and I can empathize and we can go through our stressors together.
Right.
For me, I feel a lot better recognizing like I'm not the only person going through it.
Right.
Maybe there's company in misery or there's
that's true, right?
understanding and stress. Like, but after our conversations, because you and I understand what the other's going through, I feel so much better.
Right.
Even if it didn't solve anything, we can talk about it. So for me, it's like it's a social support knowing I have
You're venting about it, right?
Yeah.
So you have that. So everyone has that therapist, right? Whether they're licensed or not, everyone should or hopefully has that person that they vent to.
And I like that you're doing air quotes.
Yeah.
Because therapist can be anybody who has an understanding of what you're going through.
Correct.
Right? You lean on your dad for support.
Right.
And I love the fact that you reach out to him and he offers you sage guidance, right? He has a lot of wisdom, whether it comes from business, economics, family, and understanding of many, many things in the world.
Right.
Same with my dad. We like to reach out to our dads for support, and we hope to be that same person for somebody else, right?
Right.
And that level of support has guided you in a business sense, and also, I would imagine, as a father, right?
Right.
Over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
When things are going good or when things aren't going good,
Yeah.
right?
You need that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you can, like we said, if you can communicate that or have that relationship before and not just wait to build that family, friends, community when things are rough, then you're set.
Mm-hmm.
If not, you're trying to play catch up,
Yeah.
and it's hard to play catch up when things are already going array or going bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do you now try to get things together? The same way I say with medications, right? You come off medications because you're feeling really good. It doesn't mean that when you have a life stressor, just going back on the medication just makes you feel hunky-dory again.
Yeah.
It can take time. So sometimes it's also understanding that, I think we talk about therapy obviously a lot here, but with medications, when you decide when you want to come off a medication or not, it's important to look at also, do you have that family support? Do you have those systems in place, right? In case something does come awry, what do you do?
Well put. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I always assess timing, time of the year, the situation, the circumstance. It's easy for between June and August, people want to come off of medications, right?
Yeah.
Life is good. School or work is maybe not as busy. We're feeling like we're on a high. Things are generally stable and consistent, and the weather is great. So there's lots to do in our great state. But we always have to, as the practitioner, the provider, as the therapist, as the counselor, whomever, recognize, hey, fall's coming, winter is coming, Game of Thrones, and there's going to be a shift
The North.
where we have to be able to recognize that it might not be as easy, right? Let's put those fail safes in place. Let's put those protections in place so we know that when seasonal affective disorder season comes around, we're well prepared and we're protected against potential decompensation.
Correct. Yeah. And even if you're in a state that does not have a winter, right? There are life stressors. You're going to have a life stressor.
Yeah.
So even if you're in a current life stressor and it sounds like, oh my God, this is crazy. Unfortunate way of life is you're going to have another one. It's just the way life works. So it's if you can handle this stressor or if you're not handling this stressor that well, understand something else is coming or something else can come, hopefully not, right? But that's just the way life works. You have to have those protections, like you said, in place. And then you're set, hopefully, right? You can then work through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then give those support systems to your other friends as well, right? You can be a support, even if you have mental health, you can be a support for somebody else or kind of work through that, like a peer support almost, right?
Absolutely.
For whoever it may be. But hopefully, like we said, that needle moves faster culturally, generation-wise within your own family as well. If there's an issue going on, hopefully things kind of shift. And being aware of mental health is one thing, and then taking action to actually work through it is the next thing, right?
Absolutely.
50% is recognizing, the next 50% is actually doing it.
I have a difficult question for you.
Hit me.
So, growing up in your household, I want you to, if you're able to answer this question for me, how do you think an individual, doesn't matter your socioeconomic or your race background, but how do you think an individual broaches that conversation with a family member or a whole support system who doesn't understand mental health? How do you tackle that with someone who doesn't recognize anxiety or depression as a thing?
So I think it's I guess you can look at it culture or non-culture, right? So that's the hard thing. I'm thinking about patients that I deal with right now, for instance. You can try, and it's easy for us to come up here and say, tell your parents about mental health and educate them and tell them. So, the view is kind of similar to other things, right? Like politics, religion, whatever it may be, things that are hard to talk about. you can't convince every single person to understand what you're going through. That's not the intent, right? You can try. You can say, hey, like mom and dad, this is what I'm going through. They may or may not be supportive on it. You can try and do your best effort to calmly, to effectively explain to them what you're going through, right? If it doesn't work, you have to also understand that you can't force them to understand what you're going through. Mm-hmm. You can't hate them. You may be upset, but you shouldn't hate them for not understanding what you're going through. But it doesn't mean that now your support's completely gone and now like your life crumbles, right? There are other other coping mechanisms, other community support that you can outreach to. So then you have to lean on those more than someone who would have parents that may be understanding of what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. So like my dad, for instance, or my parents are understanding. If I brought something to them, they'd be like, yeah, right? I'm an only child, right? Only needed one kid to get, no, I'm just kidding. But, I'm an only child. So my parents obviously would be, I know how they are. They're open-minded to it, right? Or they understand what's going on. But if I didn't have that, I'd have to lean on some others, right? In my community, my friends, family, whatever, cousins, whatever it may be, that would be there for me. But I wouldn't knock it on them for not understanding mental health, right? Sometimes when we give talks and lectures and whatever it is, like yesterday I was in Adrian City Hall, right, talking about it. And the idea is I always say, hey, everyone sitting in this room here today, we all understand mental health because either you deal with it or someone in our family deals with it or someone close to you deals with it. Mm-hmm. But there are some that still are in that situation around those components that deal with mental health that still don't accept mental health. Mm-hmm. But you can't force a square peg into a round hole sometimes. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to then move on and then say, okay, I'm not going to keep trying to convince you that my anxiety that I'm going through, my depression I'm going through, my ADD I'm going through is the reason why I'm not getting my chores, getting my things done, or not as functional, or my grades aren't as good as they could be, whatever it may be, right? Mm-hmm. So then you have to kind of move on to the next step. I know I kind of rambled on there a little bit, but there's many avenues to this, mm-hmm. but you can't convince somebody who doesn't want to be convinced that Absolutely. Mental health is a real thing.
Absolutely. I appreciate a couple things in your answer. One, you talked about two keywords there that I heard are understanding and accepting, right? So we can all have our own understanding of what mental health encapsulates and what it looks like, right? On the surface, externally or internally, what mental health means to each person is going to vary a little bit. So someone who may not be well-versed in mental health may not have the understanding that a higher level trained professional will have. But we all are affected by it. It would be very difficult to find someone who doesn't have someone in their life who is affected by mental health issues or concerns or disorders.
Right.
But accepting it is a whole nother matter. And I appreciate you spoke to the fact that it's important for us to not hold against other people how they support you. You referenced your parents. So I'll reference maybe the same situation with my parents or another individual. If somebody offers you support, it may not feel as supportive inherently. And I think what I'm trying to say is you don't want to hold it against somebody if they don't know how to support you when you're struggling, right. and they do know how to support you when you're doing well, and they can offer you reassurance and clap at your accomplishments. But we don't want to harbor resentment for somebody who doesn't know how to support you when you're feeling anxious or feeling upset and you can't vocalize or articulate why.
Right.
So I appreciated the fact that you brought that up. I think that's an important topic. I hope I'm hitting the nail on the head and it's not confusing. But I liked how you said that. We don't want to necessarily like cast a negative light or like give someone else a hard time or cut someone out of our life because we don't feel well supported when they may not have the capacity to offer the support that you think you need.
Right.
But they're trying to help you. They're trying to understand. They're trying to put themselves in your shoes and say, what can I do to make your life better? How can I help you on your difficult time right now?
I'll be devil's advocate to what I just said too, okay? Just because, I like to be a pain in the butt sometimes. No comment, right? So the way I look at this, what about this conversation, right, is marriage counseling. Okay? We have husband or wife, take your pick, that says, hey, we need to go to marriage counseling. You and I have a relationship, Taylor. We got to go to marriage counseling.
Okay.
I think we should go. And you're like, no. Mm-hmm. So do I throw shade at you or do I say, hey, it's your fault that we're not going because I feel like we need to go? Because we're saying for a parent, I know I'm being controversial.
Sure.
But for parents here, we say, hey, no, don't knock on them for not actually understanding. You do your best to explain to them. But if you can't, you have to rely on your other support systems. Mm-hmm. What do we do if it's in marriage counseling?
It's a great question. I mean, family goes beyond blood, right? But your spouse is arguably the closest person to you in life and is absolutely going to be in your corner no matter what God willing, right?
Right.
We hope that that's
Hopefully.
the case. But when it comes to making a decision that affects both parties, that's something that you have to come to together, right? It's difficult to be led into something such as marriage counseling if you're not interested. If you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, one person may benefit, the other person may not. Also, when two parties are involved, I think it changes the dynamic of therapy, right? Individual therapy is very different than group therapy or a session involving more than one person. So I know I'm not necessarily answering your question, but I think it's difficult to answer because this would definitely be something that's case by case basis.
Yeah.
You can't speak for the individuals that are there. I think in my experience with clients that may have engaged in group therapy or anything close to marriage counseling, it's that it really takes a high level of involvement, and it takes two individuals who are really vested and intentional about wanting to improve things.
Right.
And I think that's the only way that you're going to find any kind of common ground for whatever reason may take you to marriage counseling or any kind of group counseling.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, right? I'm thinking of cases that we see all the time. So if you have, when this brings up like obviously both parents coming together, right? Now, if you look at it, whether they're married or separated or divorced, what throws a real big curveball is if there's kids or a child involved that requires or is recommended to be on a medication.
Absolutely.
So again, controversial topic, right? But if the kid, from a medical standpoint, from our standpoint, or from what the prescriber says, hey, they should be on a medication, and one parent agrees, one parent doesn't agree, now what do we do?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I still had a good answer. I feel like I face this at least once a week, seeing a lot of adolescents and pediatric clients. It's a very delicate situation. And I don't have a one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
I've been involved in situations that have become litigious. I've been involved in situations where it's unfortunately parent versus parent. And I often feel as though the client is the only person who suffers. And it's hard for me to talk about because I get very frustrated for the client who I'm trying to help. Inherently, the client is caught in the middle, in my estimation. And it's really hard to advocate for that client to say, hey, you're here of your own volition. This is not a mediation session. All I want is to help your son/daughter/individual.
Right.
And if we're coming here to make life harder on the other person, we're not here for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
The parents, I argue that the parents need to understand, have your opinions. Like keep your opinions on medications, yes or no, therapy, yes or no, mental health, yes or no. I'm not judging you by any means. The last person here that should be judging you, right? But your son, daughter, whoever is in the office today, we're talking about this concept. I've had it where only one parent shows up, the other parent doesn't even consider showing up. At least show up and have a conversation and express your views on why you feel like it's not necessary. Not let me try to convince you, but let me try to explain to you why I feel it's medically necessary to be on a medication or would help the patient. Now, based on the individual's age, right, you can say, hey, like he or she also feels like we should be on a medication.
Right.
If they're like maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, right, maybe they don't have obviously enough insight onto what's going on. Different story.
Precisely.
But I'm talking about, I can remember vivid patients, 16, 17, 15-year-olds that have said, my parents don't agree for me to be on this medication or another medication, or my dad doesn't agree, or my mom doesn't agree. Let's just wait till I'm 18. And I look at it, I'm like, so you want to just chill here for 3 years or 2 years and wait, knowing that, hey, we're not doing well, including having severe depression or moderate depression, to say, hey, we're just going to wait and see what happens. Or wait until, we get to 18 years old because now you can make your own medical decisions. It's mind-boggling.
It is.
So it's the onus on the parents, right? And maybe this is a controversial topic, but whatever, that we need to at least have a conversation, both parties, with the clinician, with the patient, to see why he or she recommends them to be on medication.
Absolutely.
I know we went off on a tangent there a little bit, but I think they're all connected because, again, it comes into your support.
It does.
Because that patient now does not have the support of both parents, maybe only one parent, or maybe neither parent.
I'd argue you just came full circle. That is a clear example of lack of family support.
Right.
Because this patient is a part of the minority, they've not yet joined the majority over 18 years old, they have to delay getting the help that they feel they need. Whether they're right or wrong, your point is so valid to say, let's have the conversation. Open up the floor. Tell me about your reservations. Is it because you had a family member who did poorly on a medication? Is it because you have a misconception of what mental health is and you think that everybody needs to be hospitalized? Do you believe that medications are not something that can be beneficial? Or is there another reason why you're skeptical or have these disinhibitions about wanting your adolescent to get care? What is it? What's holding you back that won't let your kid get the care that they are saying that they need or think they need?
Right.
And maybe when that conversation is done, you as the clinician say, hey, let's be real. You don't really need a medication. We just needed to talk.
Right.
Or maybe you need a therapist. Maybe you need someone who you can talk to sort through some of the things that you're going through right now. And you reach that happy medium.
And I'm not also saying, I'm always like thinking, right? I'm not also saying that, hey, the clinician says, he or she should be on a medication. They have to be on a medication. I'm not saying we're always right.
Right.
Like I tell patients, we could be wrong in some situations. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be wrong, but we'll follow up and we'll make sure we get the best option for you. What leads me to mention this is we have lately seen a lot of schools say your kid has bad grades. Mm-hmm. They should be on a medication. Just having bad grades doesn't mean you should be on a medication. Absolutely. Otherwise, I would be medicated at 5. I had terrible grades growing up.
Yeah.
All throughout life. Maybe I'm untreated. But the idea is that, because your grades are bad doesn't mean you should be on a medication. So if you're a parent that's saying, hey, these guys are just trying to say be on medications, I'm not saying that. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is have the conversation with the clinician to say, yo, this is why I feel like they don't need medications. I understand the grades are bad. I understand we're having some minor behaviors. But hey, let's try some therapeutic changes. What do you think we could do at home that could change things? What could the school do? An IEP, whatever kind of assets or aspects could be helpful. Mm-hmm. And then we can consider medication if you want to. Or hey, I don't believe in medications. I don't want to medicate them. I think they needed to develop this. Understand, you're the parent. We get it. Mm-hmm. But then you still have to work on it at some level. School social worker outside, the prescriber even can still give you techniques, right? Mm-hmm. I think we lose that. It's always like, they said medication, they said no medication. So like, what's a disconnect? It's like, no, if we all work together, we can decide, is there a need for medication with or without therapy?
It's a massive hot button topic. I'm so glad you brought it up. It's a really, really good example. And I wonder if this is something that we can expand upon at some point, is just talking about.
We need one of those applause buttons,
We do. Absolutely. Academics don't dictate needing help right off the bat, right? There's a larger conversation to be had about what executive functioning looks like, or what a kid spends 8 hours of their day at school or in academics. There's another 16 hours of the day. And we have to take, as the clinician, we have to take that whole picture into account before we can make the call whether yes or no to something being needed. I appreciate you bringing that up. It's definitely something that I'd like to talk about. But as the larger picture, when we're looking at family support, and we look at the multiple different elements that go into what makes up your own support system, I think we can recognize that there needs to be a level of understanding. There needs to be some level of acceptance. And if you don't have the traditional sense family support, we both agree that it's important to go find that support in other places. Reach out. Don't hesitate to ask for help. Don't ever isolate yourself away from others who might be able to help you, and try to find people who can get on your level and offer their own help as well.
For sure. Well said.